Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Switzerland, it's Space Café Scotland time. Our Space Café Scotland by Angela Mathis will begin soon. We would really like to thank ESA Space Solution and Astra Agency for their great support for this event series. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. We constantly learn and improve based on the feedback you give. My name is Chiara Monter. I'm the event coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global, as well as the host of the Space Café Benelux, together with my co-host Barnu Bazingi. SpaceWatch.Global is a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. With Angela Mathis, CEO of Think Tank Maths, we have found a great friend and a wonderful host for our outreach in Scotland. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcasts. Our latest episode, which will come out tomorrow, is with Elodie Viau, Director for Communications at ESA. So definitely worth a listen, so take the time. We also keep our fan shop online open for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. Edition 1 has cool items for you, your friends, and the ones you love. And your support is needed to keep our work alive. We do that for you. So if you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our webpage in the events section and on YouTube. And we will host our Space Café Scotland live regularly. And with that, my job is done, and I would like to hand you over to your host today. Angela, over to you.
Hello, Space Watchers. We're going to have a conversation today about inclusion. How to help people feel they are included in the space journey of Scotland. And that means that there could be a job in space with their name on it, no matter where they're starting from. So first of all, I want to dedicate this Space Café Scotland, because of the theme, to a very special friend and friend of Scotland, and that is George Abbey Sr., Sir. Thanks to the book that was published on his career as the director of the Johnson Space Centre, The Astronaut Maker, which I recommend you read. It's a huge insight. George Abbey championed space aspiration and inclusion in Scotland since the early 2000s, with the NASA outreach team during what was called then NASA in Scotland. And it's now the Scottish Summer Space School at Strathclyde University here in Scotland. At its peak, the NASA in Scotland, 2007, the outreach team brought 15 NASA astronauts and engineers and Russian cosmonauts to Scotland. They toured the length and breadth of Scotland, visiting the islands, flying out, getting trains, and talked to 22,000 young Scots. I like to think it primed, and that it is continuing to prime all the efforts for the current enthusiasm in the Scottish space industry. And now to have my conversation with my guests today, they're Kenzie Young, who's just completed the Scottish Space School at Strathclyde this summer, and Mick O'Connor, who's the Programme Director at the Prestwick Spaceport. I'm going to let Kenzie and Mick introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Kenzie. Do you want to kick off?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kenzie. I'm 16 and I'm from Linlithgow, and I'm currently going to 6th year and studying some advanced hires and stuff. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say.
So maybe you could tell us just a little bit, I mean, you know, why you're fascinated with space. Why did you apply for the space school? What is your ambition in space? Maybe a wee bit on that.
I first started really liking space and getting into space when I was in primary 6. We were all watching Newsround, which is like a wee sort of children's news show that we'd watch every day, and they did this interview with these Americans at American NASA space camp. And there was only one girl out of the 15 of them that got selected to go to it, and she was basically promoted as a role model to females in space. And before that, I hadn't really thought it was like a women's job. I thought it was like a job that was exclusive to men, and seeing her up there kind of inspired me to, you know, gearing myself towards space. And ever since then, that's what I've been going towards, like science and space and engineering. And that's why I applied for the space school, because I just thought it'd really be a great opportunity, which it was. It was amazing. It was a great experience, and I was so glad to be a part of it. And it's just a real great helping hand for people who want to continue a career in space.
Fantastic. And Mick, over to you. You've got your intro to do.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Angela. So as Angela mentioned, I'm Mick O'Connor. I'm proud to say that I'm an engineer. I've got a background, a bit of a varied background in the oil, petrochemical, shipbuilding, aerospace, aviation, energy industries, and now in space. I've got my own business called Halo Consulting, and we specialise in helping organisations overcome complexity. And we've developed software to help organisations make sense of complexity. I'm also a visiting professor of employability, entrepreneurship, engineering at Glasgow Caledonian University. I'm passionate. In fact, I am really passionate about engineering and technology, and particularly how we combine engineering technology with creativity and entrepreneurship to help young people find the roots out of poverty, which is the theme of the day, which is all about inclusion. And as Angela mentioned earlier, I'm also the program director at Prestwick Spaceport.
Brilliant. So engineering, it's not all about engineering. And I want us, we decided we're going to have a conversation. So we're going to just all talk to each other, and anybody who's pitching in, this isn't going to be a sort of, you say your lines, we move to the next person. So just to set the scene, I mean, your brilliant phrase, Mick, which is, there are times in life when we just need someone to place their hand on our shoulder and show us the way. That's a very inspiring piece, and it's not all just about becoming an engineer, right? I mean, it's what's behind that phrase for you?
Yeah, there's at least one thing behind it. So in school, I wasn't academically gifted. So things like maths and science weren't my strength, but I was particularly good at practical subjects. So whether it was engineering, drawing, or metalwork or art, I excelled, but not so much in the academic subjects. So leaving school, I didn't have any aspirations of pursuing an academic career or going to university. So I started as an apprentice in the shipyards in the Clyde. So I started as an apprentice welder. And what I found was that many of the things that seemed to elude me at school for some strange reason didn't. And I realised that my learning style is visual and kinesthetic, i.e. quite tactile. I want to be involved and I want to have my hands on it. That's how I learn. Yeah. And I did well at college as part of my apprenticeship. And at the end of that, I was awarded with what was called the Prince Philip Prize by the Glasgow Corporation of Hammermen, which was for the best engineering student in the west of Scotland. And really that's where that phrase came from, because it was a seminal moment for me and gave me a level of confidence that I certainly didn't have prior to winning the prize. And to me, that was the first people who then laid their hand on my shoulder and gave me, I think, confidence, gave me belief. And I thought, I can take my life in a completely different direction. So for some reason, as a 20-year-old, I realised that I can do anything in life I want to achieve. And the only person that can actually stop me is me. And that's a mantra that's lived with me my whole life. And I've got to that stage in my life where it's now my turn to show others the way. I've got 40 years of experience of doing a variety of things. And if we've got young people who perhaps are following my footsteps, perhaps aren't academic, or they are academic, it doesn't matter. I think that the role that we've got is to help them, encourage them, inspire them, and to help them. And I think that's one of the roles that I now give myself, and it's something I'm taking very seriously, and it's something I'll probably touch on a bit later on, Angela.
Yeah, you're actually formalising that in a fantastic way, which I think is great. So Kenzie, you've, we've, I actually know, I mean, what was your, I mean, you say you saw a TV program, but the hand on your shoulder, you seem to me like a very, nothing's going to stop you. The only person that will stop you doing anything. Tell us a wee bit about, your attitude to life, the things you do. I mean, you've done skydiving, right, and all sorts of stuff recently. I mean, tell us all about sort of what is it that empowers you or has empowered you.
Yeah, August has been a good month for me. I went skydiving and I rode Speedway in the first week, which was amazing. Skydiving's been a massive thing that I've wanted to do for ages. I just had to wait till I turned 16 to do it, which was a bit annoying, but finally I did it and it was everything that I expected it to be. It was just so much fun. It was a great experience and it was, I felt like flying, honestly. It was so good. Proper adrenaline rush. I really liked it. But yeah, I've always been told by both my parents just to go for what I want. The only thing that can stop me is myself. If you put the hard work in, anything's achievable. My dad especially has been a really good hand with that, because obviously when you tell folk you want to be an astronaut, they all kind of like, not giggle, but they go like, okay, but what else would you do? Do you know what I mean? Nobody ever says that. If you were to say, oh, I want to be a teacher, they'd be like, oh, well, that's nice. But when you say something like, I want to be an astronaut, people go, oh, that's great, but what are you really going to do? Whereas when I told my dad, he was not like that at all. He was like, right, that's great. What are you going to do to achieve that? What steps are you going to take to do this? Are you going to join the space school? Are you going to look for programs outside of school? And it was just taking those opportunities outside of school as well, because I think a lot of folk, they just wait till the end of their like school career to decide what they're going to do, and then they'll go to uni. Whereas I've been told to like go out and by myself and find opportunities that would advance me towards the goal that I want to achieve. And I think also having like a really specific goal, like I know this is what I want, this is what I've directed my whole sort of life and like school career towards, and it's like not an option to fail now. Do you know what I mean?
And there's I loved, folks, we had a wee chat before we came on this, and one of the things Kenzie says, and I think it's brilliant, she does, if you look at her LinkedIn or you look at her profile, she does maths, woodwork and bagpipes, and I think that's a brilliant, just a wonderful combination as a woman who manages a maths research company doing things in space and new energy and stuff. I just think that combination of bagpipes. So you do have you want to tell us about your ambition about bagpipes and the moon?
When I was I always said to my dad I wanted to be the first person to play the bagpipes on the moon, and I was absolutely raging when I found out somebody had played the bagpipes on the International Space Station, because they were taking my thunder, which was so annoying. So, but the moon's still up for grabs, so that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, brilliant. So I think one of the things we also touched on, Mick, was the inclusion, because we're talking engineering, we're talking maths, and some people go, well, here we go again. It's maths, it's physics, it's all that stuff that I'm just not accessible. You mentioned, and I think that's really, really key as well, that your route into engineering was through an apprenticeship. My comment to you was because I've known you for a number of years, but I didn't know that you also started in Clydeside, sort of on the Docklands, and with a very famous comedian, Sir Billy Connolly, who also a welder. And if you listen to some of the stories about the welders and the community on the Clydeside, tell us a wee bit about that and how how that path and how other paths in your approach, you've mentioned this, not just STEM, but some other approach that might be useful.
Yeah, so I'll start with I'll end with the STEM, and I'll start with where the story began. So as I mentioned earlier, wasn't particularly academic, but that was absolutely fine. The shipyards, it's a challenging environment to work in, but I wouldn't change a minute. I think it was a really, really good experience. But I think as part of what I mentioned earlier in terms of my seminal moment was winning the prize. What it actually gave me was confidence to then decide, right, I'm now going to go to university. So at that point in time, when I won the prize, the managing director of the company, a really nice guy, brought me up to his office, and he was over the moon, the fact that, you know, this young person had won this prize, and that was great. And he says, what do you now want to do with your career? And I says, well, I'd like to go to university and do mechanical engineering. And he says, well, we'll support you to do that. And couldn't believe it. I thought, wow. And at that point in time, it was almost unheard of, you know, the fact that, you know, I'd done an apprenticeship as a welder, and it was been given an opportunity to then do a funded degree. Anyway, so many weeks went by and weeks turned into months. And at that point in time, although I didn't call them HR at that time, one of the HR people took me to one side and said, look, we won't actually be supporting you through university. And I asked them why. And they says, the reason why is that welders are not clever enough to do degrees. And 5 days later, I handed my notice in and I left that company. And I thought, I'll show you. So at that point in time, I then left and I went to college. So I think that I'm really passionate about, based on my own story and some of the scars that left on me, is I will decide what my future is. I will decide what my destiny is. It's down to me, and I'll make that decision. And what I think really, it breaks my heart, is the amount of people who get those knocks and believe what those other people are telling them. And I think it's all about that self-belief, which is, I think, easy to say when you've got some self-belief, but it's about helping the people that perhaps, for whatever reason, don't. And I think as part of that, as you mentioned about STEM, and certainly it wasn't me come up with it, I'm very encouraged to put the A into STEM and call it STEAM. And the reason being is, I think creativity is a really important part of the engineering process. I think there's scientific principles. I think there's hard mathematics, but the ability to go into a situation with, you know, something that's fairly abstract and critically assess it and solve a problem, I think is to be embraced. And the reason it's also close to my heart is with the project I'm involved in, is the town I grew up in was the same place that James Watt grew up in. So there's a nice link between James Watt and STEAM, and changing STEM and putting art into STEM and creativity into STEM and calling it STEAM.
And the project that you've got, can you tell us what the project's actually called and who you've involved into that project, Mick?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a place called Greenock, which is on the banks of the Clyde. It's part of a wider community called Inverclyde, and sadly, there's a lot of deprivation in Inverclyde. You know, probably all the indicators that you don't want. Inverclyde tends to be at the top of the list for, you know, criminality, drugs, various other things. And I think there's a lot of good people in Inverclyde. There's a lot of people with potential in Inverclyde. But I then look at myself and think, well, if I were to leave school in 2021 and not 1982, where would I be and where would I go? Now, I don't know the answer to the question, but I might not be sitting doing this SpaceWatch talk. Who knows where I'd be? So I really want to help the young people in Inverclyde to aspire to something better. And as part of what I'm involved in with the spaceport, we're looking at creating 4,000 jobs. And Prestwick and Greenock and Inverclyde, they're only about 40 miles apart. And I thought, how many of those young folk are even thinking for a single second that they could get a career in space? So it's almost like the opportunity in Prestwick is in a different universe, no pun intended. So what I'm looking to use is space as a catalyst. So what we're looking to create is a thing called the Inverclyde Makerspace. We're working with a US-based company or organisation called NextFab Foundation. It's led by a philanthropist. They have experience of going to places that's been subject to economic decline, places like Pittsburgh and the Rust Belt. A very similar story to Greenock, Inverclyde, where they saw the decline of the steel industry in a very, very short amount of time. Lots of people lost their job, and again, they saw unemployment, drug taking, all these things, but things were going the wrong direction. And Pittsburgh is a real success story through companies like, and organisations like NextFab Foundation. So we've been in discussion with them, and they see a lot of parallels between Pittsburgh and Inverclyde. But likewise, they get into places like Syria, that's not been subject to economic decline. It's been through war and conflict, and help people, introduce young people to technology, entrepreneurship, etc., but give them a positive route out and a positive destination. And really that's what we're looking to do in Inverclyde. We're also working with the Royal Society of Arts. So I'm a fellow of the Royal Society, so we're working with the Royal Society, and they've been very supportive. We're also working with Skills Development Scotland, and we're also now working with Scottish Enterprise. And everybody is very, very supportive. But what we now need to do is complete a feasibility study. We believe that the feasibility study will be favourable, and then we're looking at creating this place and creating this space that really embraces technology and creativity and entrepreneurship. It's giving people hope, belief, and skills.
Brilliant trio of stuff. And Kenzie, how does that resonate with you? Because you're not just about, I want to be an astronaut and play the bagpipes. That would be far too disrespectful to you. It's a much more serious side to your vision in life. What do you say to what you've just heard there? I saw you taking some notes from what Mick just said.
I think that putting the A in STEAM, putting the A in STEM to make it STEAM is really, really good. I think that having the arts included is not something that I'd ever thought about before it was mentioned yesterday, but it's when you sort of get down to it and you think about the creativity that is needed within science, technology and engineering and math and stuff, it makes total sense. And I also think that I've heard a lot of people saying what you've said, that you'd be told you're not clever enough to do this. I've got lots of friends in school that have been told they can't take subjects because they're not going to pass it, which I think is terrible, because you're cutting off somebody's opportunities there. Someone could defy expectations, but they're never given the chance to prove themselves, which I think is one of the flaws in the education system. It should be, tackled right at an early stage, right in schools, rather than out of schools. But I mean, if people could just look back and see like where you've gone now, Mick, from where you used to be, they'd be absolutely punching the air. And I think that's the case with a lot of people. So I do think that more people need to be encouraged into STEM, and it's not just people that are book smart, it's also people that have different types of like skills out with that, like including the arts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think there was a phrase that came out of our conversation. Both of us agreed. I mean, and I'd never. It's you can say. I think Mick, you were saying, would you want to be? Well, I want to be a footballer, and it's your story. Well, are you doing the hard yards? Are you a member of a team? Are you doing this? Are you doing are you doing the training? Are you, what's, or if you want to be be an astronaut. I mean, you've got to put in, or you want to become an engineer. I mean, look at it. You've got to sort of fess up and say, well, it's not going to just fall in your lap. You've got to want it, and you've got to go for it after that. I think both of you are testament to that. So, Kenzie, you want to tell us about, because I think it's really important. We'll come back to Mick's got a whole bunch of stuff, but you want to tell us about the space school and how accessible that makes it. I mean, I mentioned it before. There's a history here since the early 2000s in Scotland of NASA actually coming here with this cohort of incredible people. I had the privilege of being part of the thing for several years, and some wonderful local people, including Gordon McVie. I don't know if he's listening in, who was Bennett's with Scottish Enterprise, and many others, Alec, etc., who were involved. And it's lived on And so you know, this is available. I have deliberately put the link to the Scottish Space School into the LinkedIn invitation to this, or the publicity to this. But tell us about the questions you had to answer, because I think there was some really interesting thing there. How did you get in? How did you get into it? How was the selection process, and what struck you about that?
I absolutely loved the Scottish Space School. I think it was a really, really great opportunity. It's a great program, and I couldn't promote it enough. Like, I just think it's absolutely amazing. I first heard about it from my dad in 2019, and I was 14 at the time, so I wasn't old enough to join yet. And we went through and we sat into one of the lectures that was being given through in Strathclyde to the Space School of that year. This was back when it was pre-COVID in-person lectures, and I was like, this is absolutely amazing. We were given a talk from one of the engineers that did like the bioscience engineering, and then we also got a talk from one of the astronauts there, and I think his name was Doug Wheelock, and he was just amazing, and it was so interesting to watch. And then I got home and I was buzzing about it for ages, and then just at the end of S5 our school sent out an email and it had the link to apply to the Space School in it. So that's how I was shown to apply for it. And it was great because it wasn't just sent to the people who had done physics in school. It was sent to the entire year. So everyone, you have to be 16 and over or at the end of S5. So it was sent to everyone who met the age range, and you can apply for it through the link. And the application process was so easy and so simple. Everything they wanted from you was just laid out into really simple boxes. And it was straightforward questions, and then there was some strange questions in there as well, like if you could design any product, what would it be and why? And there's another one that said if you could have 3 people and invite them to dinner, who would they be and why? And then you had other questions that were more directly related to the course, being like, what would you do if you were accepted? What could you bring to the course? Why do you want to be accepted? But I can't stress how easy the application was. Like, it was so straightforward in them telling you what they need from you. And it was really easy just to send away. So I sent mine away. And then about a month later, I was just opening my emails from school because all my teachers were emailing me being like, oh, well done, Kenzie. And I was like, why? Well done for what? I was so confused. And I checked my email, I get a message saying, oh, congratulations, you've been accepted into the Strathclyde Space School. And I was absolutely buzzing. I was so excited because, like, I'm clever, but there's definitely a lot of people in my school that are a lot more clever than I am. And there was only 2 people from our school that got accepted, me being one of them. So I was absolutely buzzing. It was just something I was not expecting. So I was so excited for it up until the point where it came. And then it was a week-long course. So it was Monday to Friday. And it was over Zoom because of COVID, which was annoying, but I'm still glad that we got to take part in it and we still got that opportunity despite the fact that we can't be in the same room as each other, which is great. So it consisted of like 2 halves. The first half was sort of presentations, and we got presentations from all different types of people. We got them from astronauts, we got them from university students who were in the end of their university career. We got presentations from people who had been running the space school for years and sort of their experience, and it was really insightful and it was really helpful to hear people's sort of journeys, because before that I wasn't aware that the majority of astronauts go to the armed forces for some amount of time. It's just totally something that had never crossed my mind, but pretty much every single astronaut that we got a speech off of said that they either joined the army or the RAF to get their wings, and then that's what gave them the qualifications to actually be selected as an astronaut. So it was really good to hear that, because they kind of laid out how they became an astronaut, and it made it clearer for us to see the roadmap to how we could become astronauts, which I really liked. And then the second part of it, you were split into groups and you were tasked with sort of solving one of 3 problems in space. So there was 3 problems that were eating in space, sleeping in space, and exercise in space. And our group was assigned with sleeping in space. And we created a pair of goggles. It's like a sleep mask, and it has motorized polarized lenses in the front part, and they change to sort of reflect the light to different sides, so that no matter where the light is coming in from, because obviously the sun goes round and it changes direction of the sun, you change, you're moving your bed, the lights are on and stuff like that while the astronauts are sleeping. So no matter where the light's coming from, it's blocked out completely to help sort of keep the astronauts' circadian rhythm in check. And then also because astronauts sleep in shifts and other astronauts are doing work while they're sleeping, they have headphones in the band there to sort of drown out the sound, so it makes it easier for people to sleep. And that's R1, and we made a big presentation on it, and we all presented it to a panel of judges that consisted of the students, people that ran the space school, and the astronauts, which was so daunting because it's like presenting a solution to people that have actually been in space, have actually lived through the problems, which was so scary, but it was fun nonetheless, and we were getting feedback off of it, and everyone sort of presented their different products and stuff, and it was just so much fun, and it was so interesting and insightful, and it was just a great opportunity.
And I think Mick, we want to know, so who did you invite to dinner? Who were you inviting to dinner in your questionnaire? Who would you invite to dinner? And what was the other question they asked you? What was your product? So tell us about who you invited to dinner, and what was the product that you said would be important, you would like to invent?
Who I would invite? Sorry.
Yeah. Who would you invite then first, Mick? Who would you invite?
You probably don't know who I would invite.
Well, go ahead.
Probably not as inspiring as Kenzie, I'm sure.
Well, Kenzie will go first. Tell us, Kenzie, who did you put in? Because obviously it was a winning combination of what you said. Tell us and why.
I first said Captain Sir Tom Moore because I just thought he was absolutely amazing and inspiring during lockdown. With all of his walking up and down the garden and stuff, it was amazing hearing the stories, people that hadn't walked in years due to their, respective conditions, and they were all getting up and walking because he'd inspired them to do so. I just thought it was amazing because the age that he was as well, and he was doing all this stuff, raising all this money. I just thought it was such an inspiration. It was really like a sort of morale lift that everyone needed during lockdown. Mm-hmm. And I just thought he was an inspiration to all of the UK. And then second of all, it was Basil Rathbone, because I just think he's amazing. I watched the old Sherlock Holmes with my dad, the black and white one, and he's just a brilliant guy. And that's doesn't really have anything to do with space, just fangirling. So, and then last I was David Attenborough, because I absolutely love David Attenborough. I think he is the best. He's just dedicated his full life towards helping the planet, helping animals. He's so educated on his topics. I just think there's a lot that could be learned from David Attenborough himself. I feel like you wouldn't have a boring conversation with him. You'd talk your ear off all night. And then the product that I said I would design was a not biodegradable, wet-resisting crop, which would withstand strong winds, and it would also withstand drought, and it would also withstand excessive rain, and it would mean that it would help with food in loads of different countries, because loads of places can't grow certain types of food because of their climate. So if you were to have this one stable crop that would grow in all climates, then it would mean that you have at least one sort of stable food source that will always be there for every country. So that was the answers for mine.
Brilliant. So Mick, you're not getting off the hook on this. Who are you inviting to dinner? Come on, tell us.
It definitely put me in the spot. So I think it would be almost a given that I would invite James Watt for very obvious reasons. The more I've learned about James Watt, he also had some challenges and some knocks as well. But he was a green boy made good. He did well. I think I'd also, to steal Kenzie's third, I would also invite David Attenborough. I think he's a fantastic person. And I think he'd just be an interesting person to have around the table. And then the third person, I think there's probably a number of people that I would invite, and I think that maybe before today I would have said Billy Connolly, possibly or probably. But what I'd say is I think there's an empty seat at my table because there's so many people I'd want to invite that I wouldn't know who. So I would say David Attenborough. For definite, and James Watt.
Brilliant. So So the other thing that you mentioned to us was about, when to come back to the art, the arts in, and you talked about the fact that on the other side, when you started talking to the arts and the theatre, they were saying, well, we need scientists to come into this. And Kenzie, you found that really interesting, the fact that people that were in theatre, they need to, I don't want to take your words away. What did that do for you? That was a light bulb moment for you, wasn't it? The conversation we had.
Two things that I'd never connected. My mum, she used to run a sort of art centre through in Howden Park Centre, it was called. And so I'd been all in the pantomimes and in the stage and the theatre all the time. And I'd met all of the technicians and stuff. And the two just never really connected to me. I'd never really considered that the technicians are working with the theatre. It sounds so silly when you say it like that, but it's not something that you would connect sort of science, technology, maths with acting and with lights and all sorts of creativity and stuff like that. So I do think that there's a lot more opportunities out there for people that aren't sort of straight physics, chemistry, biology, maths, and people from sort of the more creative backgrounds can sort of merge into these roles through things like musical theatre and stuff, and also like the lights and the sort of sound engineering and technicians and stuff that they have.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah. So, Mick, one of the things you've got to do is tell us, I'm going to give you a pitch here for the Prestwick Spaceport, because there'll be a lot of people will be signing up here to hear what's your vision for this, what are you doing, what's different at Prestwick, and you've said you want those folks all over Scotland, but with a 40 mile distance between Greenock and Prestwick, it might as well be the other side of the universe. So what are you laying out? What's the vision for that part of Scotland, which in itself needs a big injection into it?
Okay. So for people who don't know, as Angela's outlined, so Prestwick's roughly about 35-40 miles from Glasgow, just to get the geography right. It's effectively 50% of Scotland's aerospace industry is already based at Prestwick. So companies like BAE Systems, Spirit Aerosystems, GE Caledonia, and Collins Aerospace, they're already there. So there's a very strong aerospace and aviation community already based at Prestwick. So space is a natural extension or evolution to what's already there. So what we have through both the Scottish Government and UK Government is a budget of £80 million, not only to build a spaceport, but to effectively create a space cluster. So yes, there is a spaceport, and I'll talk a wee bit more detail about the spaceport in a second. But also looking at an application centre. We're looking at a STEM centre. Hopefully we can change it to a STEAM centre, but at the moment it's a STEM centre. And then we're also looking at building a commercial workspace. And our vision is all about the economic benefit to that particular part of Scotland. So what we're looking to do is create 4,000 new jobs in the space industry in and around Prestwick between now and 2035. And effectively what we're doing is using the spaceport as the catalyst to really capture people's imagination and effectively plug some of the gaps, because Scotland is already very strong in terms of satellite manufacture. There's more satellites designed and manufactured in Glasgow than anywhere else outside the US. We're also Europe's data capital in Edinburgh, so we've got a very strong space heritage, or fledgling heritage in Scotland. And what's missing at the moment is space flights. There's a number of places looking to build spaceports in Scotland, both horizontal launch and also vertical launch. And in our case, what we're looking to do is to create a horizontal launch spaceport. So using a carrier aircraft to take the launch vehicle a distance away from Prestwick, and again I'll come back to that as well. And at that point in time, we then drop the launch vehicle, it ignites and autonomously makes its way into orbit. And again, I'll talk through the detail in a second. So not dissimilar to Virgin Orbit in so much it's a horizontal solution, but it is a very different solution to Virgin. There's a degree of redundancy we've built into the system. We'll make an announcement hopefully within the next month in terms of our launch service provider partner. So who's going to provide the rocket, the launch vehicle, and who will then provide that service. So they are a US-based company, and within the next month we'll make an announcement of who they are and the uniqueness about the solution that they bring to the market. And as an engineer, having worked in aerospace and aviation, it is quite exciting what the potential of their solution is. But again, I won't ruin the surprise, and hopefully within the next month we can make that announcement. So some of the challenges we've got, and again, speaking as an engineer, we've really put systems engineering at the absolute core of what we do. So it's very much about focusing on the mission, defining the requirements, and then stitching all the individual elements of the system and the system of systems together. So there are four key elements I think is worthy of note, and I apologise if people know this, but if you don't, there are four components that they've all got acronyms, and I'm going to explain the acronyms. So we've got an LVP, an LSP, an LSO, and an RCSP. So the LVP is the launch vehicle provider, i.e. who will provide the rocket or who will provide the space vehicle. So again, that is an American organisation. The LSP is a launch service provider. So these are the people who will procure the launch vehicle and then provide a service that then gets satellites into orbit using that particular launch vehicle type. We've then got the launch site operator. So effectively, in our case, is Prestwick Airport. So effectively managing the ground activities and the refueling and the ground components and the buildings, etc. And then finally, we've got what we call an RCSP, which is a range control service provider, who will work closely with the launch service provider to ensure that missions are conducted safely. So in terms of the systems engineering, then the reason why it's important, there's a number of challenges that are presented. We've got a new set of regulation in the UK, so we've got the space industry regulation that was only enacted through Parliament at the end of July, so the ink is not even dried on the regulation. So we're now getting our heads around, well, what is the regulation? What's the regulation asking us to do? And how do we demonstrate that we're compliant? But we've also got a new regulator. So in the UK, the CAA will act as the regulator, similar to the FAA in the US, and they are new to the space industry regulation. And like us, we're all learning together. But again, when we've got new regulation, new organisations, new technology, there's some challenges in how we stitch that together. But we're working very, very closely with the CAA just to make sure that we all understand what the regulations asking us to do and make sure that we stitch it together and we do things. Ultimately, it's all about doing this, for economic benefit, but we need to also do it safely. So in terms of one of the challenges we'll have, as I mentioned earlier, unlike our vertical launch cousins, we won't launch from Prestwick, in terms of you won't see a plume of smoke at Prestwick. But what we'll do is to take the launch vehicle on the carrier aircraft to a desired launch location. The uniqueness about our solution is we can take that aircraft from Prestwick to anywhere in the world. And it doesn't really matter where we take it. We'll take it to a place that is suitable in terms of the launch trajectory, in terms of the orbital inclination that the customer wants to get the satellite into. So the challenge we've got is how we mesh the mission control and range control. And they've really got to go hand in hand, but they're very separate things. So the range control is all about creating a safe space to launch. So the nature of launch is there are certain hazards that's presented by dropping a launch vehicle from an aircraft. So what we want to do is make sure that we manage both the air traffic and the maritime traffic that's in that particular area. So it's all about the safety case, it's understanding potential splash zones, etc., and working with NATS in particular in the UK to understand the air traffic in that particular area. We'll raise a thing called a NOTAM, which is a notice to airmen, which means as part of the flight plan, you just avoid that particular piece of airspace at that particular time, because it's likely that there's going to be a rocket flying through it, or it may well be that there'll be a stage that will then drop off as the launch vehicle makes its way to orbit. And likewise, we've also got a NOTMA, which is a notice to mariners, basically saying, well, look, it's likely there's a stage going to drop into the ocean at this particular point, and it would be in your best interest to stay out that area. So that's what range control is all about. My experience is I managed businesses in the UK, MOD test and evaluation ranges up and down the UK. That was my life for 5 years. So I understand what it takes to conduct safe missions and what it takes to manage range and range control. And then the mission is very much within that safe bubble or safe environment that we'll create, is then the launch vehicle then makes its way through that piece of airspace, losing stages on the way. But it's important that we understand how the launch vehicle is behaving, so what's the speeds, the feeds, the temperatures, etc. And that's done through telemetry, bouncing off a satellite back to a ground station, and just letting us know whether the launch vehicle is doing what it's meant to do and it's behaving itself, again, within that bubble. And then it leaves Earth atmosphere, it's in orbit, and then we place the satellite. So that's what we're up to at Prestwick from an air launch perspective. But we also looked at, are we only going to do air launch, and we're only going to do air launch with that particular type of vehicle? And the answer is no. We're looking at different launch solutions. So one of the things that we're looking at that's quite exciting, if we can pull it off, will be a real game changer for Prestwick, Scotland, and I would say the UK. So we're looking at crewed space flight or human space flight. So we're working with a US-based organisation. They're developing a single stage to orbit space vehicle. We have run the blast analysis, which has been quite favourable. So we're content from that particular perspective. At the moment, we're running noise contours. And what we're looking at is the amount of noise that will be generated as this single stage to orbit vehicle leaves Prestwick. Now, we don't have the outcome or the output of that yet. I am 50-50 whether we can actually fit it in Prestwick or not, but I'll be positive and say that we can. So assuming that we can accommodate that particular launch solution at Prestwick, what it enables is a multitude of different mission configurations. So what it allows is to launch larger satellites. We'd be able to launch satellites up to about 2.25 tons, and we can deorbit satellites and bring satellites back to about 5 tons. Now, that is not the core market for this particular capability. It has the capability to do it, but it's not necessarily the target. What we see this vehicle giving us the ability to do is to enable disruptive space technologies. So there'll be a lot of companies who've got a lot of very clever things they want to do in space, but they don't have a commercially viable way of getting into orbit. And that's where this vehicle comes in. So what they would allow is in-space manufacture, experimentation, in-space construction, It can dock with the ISS, but what it can also allow as well is tactical insertion. So if we had to get from Prestwick, let's say it was humanitarian relief, and we wanted to get some boots in the ground and some equipment in the ground quickly, potentially within 90 minutes, we're on the other side of the globe. So there's about 40 different mission configurations that we've looked at. So as I said earlier, very exciting, a real game changer for Prestwick, Scotland and the UK if we can pull it off. But there's a big if, and it's all really centering around the noise contours. But hopefully within the next 4 to 6 weeks, I will know the answer to that, and I've got my fingers crossed.
Amazing. And so, you know, I would say, you know, Kenzie, it's a brilliant time to you being popping out the other end of your education with all of this going on here, right? I mean, I'd agree. There are questions I can see questions in the chat, and there are, you know, folk are asking us about, I mean, this is usually where Torsten steps in, but I'm just, while Mick's on a run, you know, Brexit, how is that impacting research in Scotland? You know, we do a lot of stuff with everybody around the world, and we've done a lot of research with, you know, particularly within Europe. What's Scotland's relationship with the European Space Agency? So maybe you could talk a wee bit about your perspective from Prestwick, but also maybe the rest. Let me see, is there a plan to bring up a launch pad in Scotland? So these are some of the someone also said humanitarian relief, 90 minutes or less. Mick, take my money. Oh yes. I mean, this is game changing for humanity, this stuff, right? So you want to take some of those? I'm sorry, Kenzie, but I think, you know, we'll come back before we round off. But do you want to take some of those questions around Europe, around partners, around research in Scotland?
Yeah, no problem. So I'll take the second one first. So in terms of launch pads, there are 3 other spaceports in construction in Scotland at present. So we've got Sutherland Spaceport, we've got Saxe-Ford Spaceport in Shetland, and we've also got Spaceport 1 in the US and the Outer Hebrides. And, you know, they're doing some really good stuff. We're working very, very closely with the guys. We've got what we've created is a thing called the Spaceport Alliance as part of the Scottish Space Leadership Council. And that's all about us working together in a collegiate way for the benefit, not just of the spaceports, but also for Scotland and for the UK for that matter. So each of those spaceports are your traditional vertical launch spaceports. In terms of the ESA, I think was it ESA or EASA or both? Was that the question, Angela?
It was the ESA. It was asking particularly what is Scotland's relationship with the European Space Agency? Mm.
So I would say at the moment, I think in terms of the relationship we've got with ESA, I would say in general terms has largely unchanged as a consequence of Brexit in the immediate term. In terms of where we are now, I mean, Brexit, without trying to politicise it, is bringing with it a lot of uncertainty. And in the UK, we're going through that uncertainty at the moment. I think to some degree, I think COVID has masked that uncertainty. So I think we're in the midst of that right now. I think in terms of the commitment to, you know, collaborating with Europe and ESA, as I say, in the immediate term, I'm not seeing a significant change. That's not to say it won't change, but I'm pretty confident and hopeful that the relationship that we had previously will continue, because again, a lot of what we're doing is not just for the good of Prestwick Spaceport or Scotland. You know, it's for the good of humanity. You know, there's a lot of good that comes from being in space, and I think it's one of the things that the space industry and space community need to get better at. It's not just about a big plume of smoke that goes to orbit. I mean, why are we sending satellites into space? So there is a lot of good, and I think we need to bang our own drum a lot more than we do. But as I said, certainly what I'm observing in the immediate term, I'm not seeing anything adverse. But we're in the early days of Brexit. But I do believe the UK government in particular and the Scottish government I think that their commitment to working with ESA, I certainly from my perspective, I don't see that changing in the short to medium term.
And I could bring to that, I think there's we are still part of the ESA programme. In fact, UK Space is putting in, I think that's been publicised. Even the COLA, there are projects that are going to be done. We are still participating in ESA. We're members of NATO, so as members of NATO, Scotland, Britain, the NATO alliance, it's very important. So we're not, and I don't think industry and the people that are capable of all these capabilities, I'd certainly know my own company is not stepping back from everything. We're making contacts around the globe, and looking to how we can push the technologies to create these, 90 minutes to have boots on the ground for humanitarian aid. And there's Kyle is saying you can have his money. So I think I hope that answers someone's questions. It's not holding us up, guys, by any manner of means. In fact, it's just pragmatic common sense. You'll find a lot of that, I think, around the world, but you get a big dose of it when you come to Scotland as well. We just, we work with people that are like-minded and are industrious to do so. I notice also David Alexander, who's a global Scot, and David is apologising and saying he's sorry, Kenzie, that you didn't get your cohort got to come to NASA as they did because of COVID. And I know David if you go on and search David Alexander, he's got a huge amount he's doing within Scotland and inspiring next generations and exactly this inclusion agenda. I think there's a lovely phrase that you also said, Mick, during our session was, suddenly overnight you found yourself being the sort of the space launch expert, which wasn't, the most expert in the space launch arena in Scotland in this whole venture, which is not somewhere you expected. And your experience with space is very young as well. So this isn't about age. This is about opportunities from wherever you are and whatever your background has been, right?
Yeah. Certainly from my, I almost stumbled into space accidentally. So as I mentioned earlier, that one of my roles, I worked with Kinetic, if people are familiar with Kinetic. I was responsible for the 4 air test and evaluation ranges across the UK. So MOD and Ministry of Defence ranges, and we tested a range of, aircraft and weapon systems and missile systems. So I knew that type of thing intimately. So I had an approach in 2019 through by the Scottish Government through Scottish Enterprise to conduct a study to look at spaceflight, space launch in Scotland. And I had to stop them very quickly. I says, look, for all the industries I've worked in, I am not a space guy. I'm not a space guy. I've worked in oil and if you want me to do oil or petrochemical shipbuilding, I'm your man. But I'm not a space guy. But what I found to my pleasant surprise, when I started to talk to people who were in space, I realised we had a lot of experts in data, in satellites, etc. But that bit where the launch vehicle goes from grade or Earth level into orbit was a bit of a black art. And what I recognised was I pretty much knew this stuff. I'd done it many, many times, perhaps not at the same altitude, but the basic principles and safety traces and safety cases and range control and telemetry and all that stuff I'd mentioned earlier is common. The only difference was altitude. So I realised, as I said, to my pleasant surprise, that I became an instant space expert and space hit, which was great. And I think at 53, it was a bit of a career shift. But I think the golden thread for me is all about engineering, technology, and a smattering of common sense.
Yeah, and I think your passion for complexity, Kenzie, I'm going to give you, because I'm noticing, getting a wee word here that we're running up to the hour. We said we could talk all night. We haven't even touched on complexity. What has this done? What is this experience of having this, having this conversation with this and what's going on in Scotland, which I'm sure you've been keeping abreast of. What would you like to add to the conversation at this point before we round off, Kenzie?
Can't think of a lot. It's interesting to hear everything that's going on in Prestwick. I never really knew about that much before today, hearing about it, and yesterday. So it's nice to know that Scotland's developing its own sort of space presence, because it is really just, when you think about astronauts, you think about America or Russia, but it's nice to hear that Scotland's kind of getting in there and getting its foot through the door in the space industry.
And working with those people around the world, I think that's really what we're saying, whether it's Europeans or the US or elsewhere. So, because there's people listening into this from all around the world, thanks to the SpaceWatch.Global network. Torsten, are you going to step in at this point, round us off? Or is it Chiara who's going to step in and round us off?
I think Chiara can do that.
Chiara can do that.
You've done all the questions here by yourself, so great one. And I would like to thank you for another wonderful Space Café Scotland. So, but back to Chiara.
Yeah, before you go, I'm just going to say, I think we've now made Mick and Kenzie absolutely another space watchers.
Yes.
So, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to position, and I really thank both of you for being so open about all of your experiences. It's been great to be on here, and I hope everyone who signed up got what they wanted and were able to, form their own ideas and how they can work with us. That'd be great. Chiara, over to you. I don't want to run over. I know if you're from Berlin or in Germany and everything has to happen on time.
Thank you so much. And thank you all of you for such an amazing session. Yes, I'd just love to give a rundown for our next events. So actually tomorrow we have our next Space Cafe Russia by Elena Morozova, which will be at 4 p.m. CST. And she will be talking to our guest about space tourism. And then in the following week, on the 7th of September at 4 p.m. CST, we have our 33 Minutes with Niels Eldering and Renee Ollie. And they are discussing how to unlock our space potential with the use of business education. Then a quick shout out on the 9th of September at 8 p.m. CST, 7 p.m. BST. There's the Space Bar, which is hosted by Astro Agency, which we're one of our supporters. So it's definitely interesting to check that out. And the day after that, on the 10th of September at 10 a.m. CST, we have our Space Café Australia, which is hosted by Annie Handmer, and she will be talking to Vienna Tran about space medicine. Following that, on the 14th of September at 4 p.m. CST, we have 33 Minutes with Lukasz Wilczynski, who will talk more about the European Rover Challenge. As always, all our events are going online on Eventbrite. And as we mentioned before, we would love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to our daily or bi-weekly newsletters of SpaceWatch.Global. And if you want to treat yourself with something special, Angela already mentioned it, become a Space Watcher. Your support helps us greatly. So just take out your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.spacewatch.global. And I know we say this often, but we do really need your support to continue this work. So thank you to everyone in the audience for your interest today, and a huge thank you to Angela, Kenzie, and Mick for this inspiring talk and for being our guests. And thanks, of course, to the entire team behind the scenes for doing that great job week in and week out. Thanks to Torsten, who's here on his birthday. And of course, also thank you to ESA Space Solutions and Astro Agency for their support. I hope that you all stay safe and stay healthy. And thank you for joining us. I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you so much.
Slancher.
Thank you very much.